He was stuck in a tree. This man swooped out of the sky and gave him to me.
Haven't I told you to stop telling lies?
Welcome to our final part covering Superman. If you haven't seen part 4, do that first. With that said, let's return to where we were now that Superman is in his fortress learning from his father. There are many that state when Jor-El tells Superman that humans need light to show them the way, proponents of the religious themes in the film state this is another example of Superman being a Christ allegory.
They can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way.
Now the film is fairly specific that Superman is around 30-something because his father died while he was in high school. We can assume he finished high school and that's when he left. Jor-El states plainly that they have studied for 12 years before he goes to Metropolis. Now notice the detail when Olsen tells the copyboy to get White's coffee and to get him a tea. The copyboy obediently does this, and you can see him a short moment later delivering that coffee in the background and then chasing Olsen around the office trying to give him the beverage. It's easy to miss this when watching it. Now there are 2 cameos when Lois and Clark leave the Daily Planet. The first is Richard Donner's reflection when Superman gets stuck in the door, and the second one is film critic Rex Reed from the 70s, who Lois speaks with as they leave. Now, in Metropolis, crime is everywhere, and it's shown before it's made apparent. You see a guy trying to shoplift from the cart here. After Clark and Lois are robbed, there was a more linear introduction to Otis, where they would get into a cab, and the scene would then directly introduce Otis walking into the shot. Then they would follow Otis like the film and focus on Armis, who is buying a plain hot dog. A story thread that was in earlier scripts was Luthor and his vicious animal pets being fed. And this was filmed, but it was a bit different than earlier concepts. In this one, Otis lowers Beef below while Lex plays the piano and Eve gives him backhanded compliments. This deleted scene would later hold relevance for the end of the film. When the helicopter approaches the Daily Planet, listen closely. The voice you hear is Christopher Reeve.
Daily Planet, Copter 1, this is ground.
Now, one of the little details in the film is how Superman and Clark's hair parts. When he is Clark, his hair is parted this way, but whenever you see him as Superman, his hair is part the other way. Once we get to Metropolis, there were tons of scenes added to the film from the extended cut, which aired on television in 1982. Later, a version of this movie was released on Blu Ray, but it wasn't complete, as it's missing some scenes. We will cover many of the extended scenes, because a lot of you probably don't have the Blu Ray. And our next one involves Superman saving Frisky the cat. The girl is not so kindly with the cat's actions, and Superman addresses this, but like most of the extended scenes, it was best cut.
He's such a naughty cat. I always tell him not to.
Oh, hold on now. Let's not be too hard on Frisky, okay? You know something? We all get a little afraid of heights now and again.
In Air Force One, there was extended footage with the pilots as they discuss their approach. They joke about peanuts, which is a direct reference to Jimmy Carter.
You mean the old man drinks? After a mouthful of peanuts, wouldn't you?
This only dated the film to Carter's term and was smartly removed. There was extended dialogue with Otis talking to Luthor as he swims, which was actually quite funny. This would lead into a great scene where Otis is cleaning and finds toupees all over Lex's room. For those not familiar to Superman in 78, this was a foreshadow that the character was actually bald. Also notice the busts in the background of world leaders used for holding Lex's toupees, thus showing his superiority complex. The scene would continue having Otis stopping by Tessmacher, telling her how beautiful she was, then offer to take her picture. But he holds the camera backwards, so he takes a picture of himself and gives it to her.
Smile!
Then he would put a robe on Lex in the water, and rather than ending the scene with Otis's surprise, which was perfect, the extended footage drags the humor on longer, as Otis apologizes and tries to wring out his robe as he walks away. Now, there are some out there that hate the fact that Luther allows Otis to hang around him, because obviously Otis isn't intelligent enough to match Luther. But once you realize that Luther really thinks he's better than everybody, having someone he can kick around all the time would amuse him. So obviously, that is why Otis is around him. After Perry White wants to know about Superman, Jimmy Olsen can be seen talking to Vinny the copyboy again. There is a moment where the boss demands coffee again, and Jimmy bosses the copyboy around, repeating the earlier scene. On the balcony, when Lois is doing her interview, Superman tells her,
Lois? I never lie.
A lot of folks hate that Superman says this, as he does lie when he disguises himself as Clark Kent daily, thus deceiving people of his true identity. Still, what he's doing is a necessary lie. How it affects you as a viewer or fan is up to you. Truthfully, the chemistry between Superman and Lois is really the key to this film, and it is there on screen, performed wonderfully. I don't think this film would have worked as well with any other performers, and to date, it hasn't had the same magic. However, during this scene, there is a lot of sexual innuendo that is subtle, and yet kids at the time didn't notice. Once again, it shows how good the dialogue was and how subtle the filming was. Another subtlety is right after Superman calls out the color of her underwear, she quickly walks back to the lead lining, blocking that view further. When Lois does her read my mind bit, it was originally intended for her to sing the lines. Donner hated the scene, but they needed something to go with the flight so it wouldn't just be 5 minutes of flying screen time in silence. In the end, it was tonally strange, and often takes many folks out of the movie, and to be honest, I am one of them. I understand why it's there, but I think it would be better if the scene was a short montage with instrumental music. However, it doesn't break the movie for me, and I don't hate it, it just feels awkward. As Superman flies away, a commonly known thing is that Kidder is being filmed in front of a projector, watching the film of Superman flying away. Then she would turn, and there would be a shot tracking her to the door where Clark would be, which was a very ingenious way to get both Clark and Superman in one flowing shot. If there is any debate if Reeve was the best Superman ever, I give you this scene.
There's something I have to tell you. I'm really... I was, at first, really nervous about tonight.
There's nothing more to say. The scene speaks for itself. During the scene where Luther devises the idea to obtain kryptonite, there was extended dialogue where Otis tries to figure out details about Superman that was really unnecessary, but it sure is fun to see Ned and Valerie play off their characters.
He's 6'4", you know that?
I said that.
But did you say he don't drink and he don't smoke?
I said that. It was in the paper right there. I said it.
Beatty is just perfect as Otis. In the background, you will see him a lot, having weird facial expressions, mimicking Luther, with just a dumb look on his face, or just finding things to eat. He's a great character. I really enjoyed him when I was a kid, and as an adult, he's nice comic relief. That doesn't go way over the top. Larry Hagman from Dallas was a wonderful cameo, and after he commands his troops to do an about-face, it would lead into a deleted scene where Miss Tessmacher would tell the soldier,
Enough. Okay now. Okay. By the way, what'd you have for lunch, Ace? Whew. Sorry.
Lex would then arrive and tell Tessmacher she's done very well in earshot of Larry Hagman. We would then cut to Otis celebrating, punching in coordinates in the missile by eating a marshmallow before he hurts his finger closing the panel. These cuts were so crucial as it made the film more slapstick than serious. Another thing that I've learned is that some people are confused about the convoy of missiles. Some state it's a plot hole that Otis messes up and that Tessmacher is sent to correct that particular missile coordinates. But that's not the case at all, as there are two different convoys depicted in the movie. The first convoy is Army, led by Hagman's character, and the second is a Navy convoy with blue shirts. Also, both convoys are protecting visually different missiles. And there's more to it than that, as there was a deleted scene that really made sense of all this. However, it does make Luther and his team seem like petty, organized criminals in the end, with too much slapstick. And it showed how adaptive and logical the character of Tessmacher was. In the deleted scene, Otis is apologizing, and they are thinking of what to do after the mess-up. Tessmacher states there is another convoy that they can utilize, and Luther gets frustrated when his two subordinates begin arguing over the wording.
See, there's another XK-101 being launched at exactly the same time.
I just said that. No, she said there was a XK-101 being launched at exactly the same time as Luthor.
There is a time jump where Otis is asking Luther to try again while they are in the big rig, and then offers Luther some food, which he rejects. Now, we don't know how long this time jump is, but Tessmacher seems to be wearing a similar getup that she was wearing at the car crash. Although it's hard to swallow they could get a wide load semi so quickly, one can wonder if Luther had a backup plan, which the deleted scene seems to dismiss. Now, an interesting little tidbit that is easily missed is that Tessmacher seems to enjoy chaos. In the scene where Luther is getting more upset, pay attention to her. She seems to get more excited the angrier he gets, until he gets out of control, and then she reacts in shock. A nice touch is that Otis has a black eye after getting beaten in the van. The movie clearly shows this, but it's an easily overlooked thing. To sum all this up, this means that Otis mistakenly reprogrammed the first missile, while Tessmacher properly put in the coordinates for the fault line on the other missile. It is Otis who is responsible for sending the missile to Hackensack, New Jersey. Had he not made that mistake, only one missile would have been part of Luther's plan. It is merely a happenstance that two missiles were involved at the end of the movie. And let's not forget that the earlier script, before Mankiewicz got involved, there was only one missile, and Luther simply distracted Superman while it got far enough to get to its target. Notice the console here. Remember, the set designer was John Barry, and of course, he did Star Wars. And what do you know? It looks the same. Also, the box with the kryptonite is Obi-Wan Kenobi's box from his home on Tatooine. Now, in the scene where Luther is describing the fault line to Superman, notice the land joke with Tessmacher peaks. It's a boob joke with two peaks. Have offense or laugh. You can take it any way you want. Hey, look! It's John Ratzenberger as the missile tech. There was a deleted scene with further dialogue from him. One of the officers state that someone is trying to destroy Metropolis, and Ratzenberger would state the missile is heading to New Jersey. There was a deleted scene where Superman would fly in front of a missile to catch it, but it would swerve away from him and continue on, much to Superman's surprise. This was an effect that should have stayed in the movie. Now, the scene with Lois and the landowner was actually a lost story arc. Luther is obviously the man trying to buy up their land, and it is discovered the reason why the landowners are suffering is that they have no water for their land, and it's not sustainable. The dam has basically blocked their water, and that is why Jimmy Olsen is at the dam to take pictures. What was cut from the movie would be after Superman blocks the water from the dam, some of that water makes its way to the family farm, and they all have joy over the fact that they have water again, while Superman watches them satisfied before knowing he has to run off. When Superman blocks the dam, the effects are very cheap and obvious, and it was best cut, but they kept it in the movie. The problem was, this was when the movie was running out of money, and the Salkinds were having serious money problems. So these cheap shots were smuggled into the movie to compensate. Speaking of the dam...
I just have a question. Is this a goddamn? Goddamn.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. I love that joke. Superman would save Jimmy from the dam as well, but rather than drop him off safely, he would stop, allowing Jimmy to take pictures while the earthquake is still causing destruction elsewhere. Putting this scene back into the movie undercut the urgency and seriousness of the plight around Superman and the citizens of that area. There would be internal footage of the train before it was about to go off the track and Superman would save them. We can see the panic inside the train, but it's not necessary as well. Now, during the earthquake, there was a lot of extra footage where buildings were trembling and more chaos ensued, including Girl Scouts trying to avoid a falling Hollywood sign. Ridiculously, when Superman pushes up the area of the fault line, the building shots are simply reversed so the buildings return to normal. And laughably, the Hollywood sign literally rewinds back to its normal position thanks to the fault line being corrected in the most unbelievable way. Never mind structural damage or gravity. After another moment of amazing performance, Superman flies away. He is confronted by his father, who is trying to stop him. Then he hears the voice of his other father, Jonathan Kent. At this moment, Superman has chosen mankind's way of life rather than the way of his distant father. So the logic of Superman turning back time is often stated as dumb, as reversing the planet's rotation would simply kill us all. I always thought this scene was an artistic representation of Superman going faster than light in order to go back in time himself, not reverse the world's time. But I could be easily wrong. And I have to be honest and be like Superman in the scene and just smile about it. My attitude is simple.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
After Lois talks with Jimmy as Superman flies away, there was a deleted scene where Jimmy would take photos of her acting like a model, and then he would run out of footage, before we would go to the final deleted scene where Otis is ordered by Lex to feed Miss Tessmacher to the babies. Superman arrives just in time to save her. Once again, the ending of the film was better without this. Now, there is a ton of deleted scenes and extended footage for this film, as there is 45 minutes added to the television version, and I don't want a 6-part to this series. There's just too much to cover. Still, you have an idea now, so check out those versions if you can find them. Superman was a phenomenon, and it was everywhere in 1978, while Star Wars was still on everyone's mind. Superman would be nominated for Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Sound during the Academy Awards. It would win none of those, but was given the Special Achievement Award for Best Visual Effects. Now, the home video rights were controlled by Warner Brothers because the Salkinds managed the film so poorly earlier. When they were way over budget and very behind schedule, Warner Brothers gave the Salkinds money, and the price was these home video rights. WCI Home Video, which is now Warner Home Video, issued Superman on VHS and Betamax on January 25th, 1980. What is stunning about this early version was that a few scenes were cut and the end credits were completely removed so they could fit the movie on one video cassette rather than having it on two due to limitations at the time. The video cassette would sell out at most stores back then, with a price tag between $65 to $100. At the same time the VHS version was released, Christopher Reeve was filming scenes on The Muppet Show, and the episode would release 2 weeks later on February 7th, 1980.
Gee, most stars get groupies. I get rats.
Surprisingly, in July 1980, Warner Brothers had a huge flop with Bronco Billy, and to compensate, they released Superman again in theaters, even though the film was just released on home media. By 1981, the television rights came back to the hands of the Salkinds, and they were going to milk it for everything they could. The Salkinds would charge for every minute the film was played on television, and so they figured they could stuff any footage they could find, even if it clashed with the tone of the film, without hesitation. A lot of this footage should not have been put back in the movie, but it's clear the Salkinds didn't care. The original cut of the film was 3 hours and 8 minutes, but Donner cut out quite a bit because he wanted the tone to be serious and believable. Since Donner was no longer contractually involved, the Salkinds used this version, and it had 45 minutes of extra footage, and we've covered a lot of that footage in this video. This was known as the Salkind International Television Cut. The version was so long it had to be split up between 2 nights, and ABC would pick up the rights to air it. Superman's debut on television was February 7th and 8th of 1982 on ABC. Donner didn't approve of this cut, but did not make a stink about it either. Some of the scenes would be put in the later director's cut. The television version was interesting to watch, and as a kid, I loved it, but it was clearly not better than the theatrical version. It's interesting seeing all those deleted scenes and extended footage, but when inserted in the film, it felt more like George Lucas's special edition of Star Wars, in that when you first see it, you think, oh, isn't that neat? And then the second time you see it, you start saying things like, wow, that really hurts the movie, or boy, that sure doesn't add anything to the movie. The cut has serious spacing issues in several scenes, and anyone who knows anything about editing would know to cut such things. But once again, we're talking about selling a movie by the minute, and it was going to be as long as they could make it, no matter if it hurt the viewing experience or not. The theatrical cut is leaps and bounds better than the extended cut. I first saw Superman in early 1979 in Gießen, Germany, at the Post Cinema when my father took the whole family. At the time, Star Wars was everything to me, and there was very little else I made time to get into, but Superman was an incredible movie experience, and Reeve was just so stunning as the main character. I didn't know a thing about the character before I saw the film, so I was floored by his abilities. He was like a super force user in my little 6-year-old mind, and I loved the idea of an earthly Jedi, which Superman clearly was not. But don't tell my little 6-year-old self that, because if it wasn't Star Wars, it didn't exist. As much as I love this film, there are many effects that are very dated, especially the blue screen work, and some cheesy moments that I enjoy less than when I first saw it. But regardless, I respect it for the time capsule that it is. Today, I see the key to this film are Richard Donner and Tom Mankiewicz. Had they not been involved, a lesser Superman actor would have been cast, and a less serious film would have been made under the supervision of the Salkinds. The television version itself and later Superman installments made it clear that Alexander Salkind did not take Superman seriously in any way. It was simply a product to exploit, and in time, that would eventually cause the ruin of the franchise, as camp and gimmicks were made more interesting than serious and believable, and we will go into that in later Superman videos. Donner did his best to make Superman believable, and it was the perfect casting that gave the film concrete verisimilitude, which was the mantra of Donner. On top of this was the perfect score by John Williams, and when you mixed everything together, it became an instant classic. To date, no actor has topped the sincerity of what Reeve and Kidder did. Of course, once again, I acknowledge that Superman is very tied to the values of which generation watches it for the time. Today, truth, justice, and the American way carry a lot less currency than they did in the 40s, 50s, 70s, and 80s. The tone of performers are also more serious and less friendly than the Donner film, or they're just caricatures waiting for the next punchline. In the end, the values of the people from the generation they grew from stem on how they view Superman. Today, I'm sure some of you who grew up with the Snyder version would see Reeves' performance as cheesy and analogous to a Boy Scout. However, those growing up with Reeves' Superman could easily say Snyder's version is not very representative of how they see Superman, because Reeves embodied the times they remember. It's all about perception, and the 1978 Superman was lightning in a bottle, and every moment, with exception to a few dated effects and some bad models, was perfectly crafted to not only immerse you, but to make you feel good about the world and possibly what each of us could strive to be. It truly is and was a magical film for its time. With that said, we've come to an end of another video series. Next up, we will continue our Alien and Predator coverage with the difficult Alien vs. Predator Requiem. This one is a dumpster fire. Pull out your drinks and start dancing. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, and sharing helps a lot. And also, click the bell notification if you like our content and want to see more of it.